Hi, welcome to my presentation for Module 2. So we are going to be talking about moderation and mediation. So first, we can talk about the differences between these two statistical tests. So as Barron and Kenny mentioned in their article, a ton of people confuse them, so a few of the main differences are laid out here. In moderation, a moderating variable influences the relationship between X and Y. McKinnon mentions in his article that in moderation, the relationships that are established are contingent upon each other. And for our purposes, we're going to be focusing on a dichotomous moderator. So we're also going to be assessing the moderator as a main effect and as an interaction. Moving into mediation, mediators are kind of a go-between between X and Y with the role of prediction and contingency. So generally speaking, the purpose is to establish a causal pathway between an antecedent and a consequence, or a predictor and an outcome. As we're interested in assessing whether there is a relationship that is more complex than the one being tested with just the single predictor and the outcome. Additionally, with mediation, there is a temporal process where X must act on the mediator before the relationships with Y occur. So first, we can start with moderation. Here we're going to be looking at if biological sex moderates or has influence on when childhood stress affects physical health outcomes. So we're looking to see if sex alters the strength of this relationship. In this case, the moderator is a dichotomous categorical variable, and the predictor and outcome are both continuous. So childhood stress and biological sex are self-report measures, with female at birth being assigned a 1 and male at birth being assigned 0 for dummy coding purposes. So health outcomes were measured through physiological tests of cardiovascular health and immune functioning. And overall, the interaction being investigated here is the effect of childhood stress and sex combined on our outcome, which is health. So we can move on to visualizing our variables. On the left here, we have our uncentered histograms, which are pretty normally distributed. We also have our VIF. However, we do want to center our variables because we have an interaction term mixed in with our main effects. So we would do this by moving the intercepts from 0 to the mean, and this would not change the shape of our dispersion, so we don't have to worry about that. So here we have our uncentered output and our centered output just to see how they differ. The centered variables will help make the coefficients a little more interpretable. Here they're pointed out, and this allows us to resolve any issues that might come up with scaling as well because of the interaction term. Since the interaction term is made up of X and the moderator, we know that they're going to be correlated. So once we center it, we're getting rid of the non-essential multicollinearity, and what we're left with is the essential multicollinearity, and that is between X and the mediator. And since we're getting rid of some collinearity, the VIF should decrease from the uncentered VIF. So we're going to check to see if that does, and we are good. So now that we've centered our variables, we can look at our diagnostic plots, and they all look pretty normal, so that's another good sign to keep moving forward. So looking at the results up on the top right here, we have a hierarchical testing. This is kind of like a step-by-step way to see the main effects and the interaction effects at each stage in developing our final model. And as you can see, all of the p-values are significant and the interaction is significant as well. So the effect of sex on the relationship between childhood stress and health outcomes is significant for both males and females. And on the left, we have our summary table. And from this, you can see that we have a significant predictor and a significant moderator because of the p-values. Additionally, you can see that our interaction is significant as well. Here, C stress, this row right here, is the average effect of reported childhood stress level on our outcome variable when the moderator is held at its mean. C sex right here is the average effect of biological sex on our outcome when childhood stress is set at its mean. And then the interaction coefficient is the effect of the interaction when the model includes both main effects. So moving on, we can look at our interaction plot here. This is calculated through simple slopes and intercepts to make two regression lines. And as you can see from the key, the pink is female and the blue is male. So a few things to note here is that we do have an interaction because it's where the two lines would cross, which is right here in this green circle. So yes, there is an interaction, and adding sex does help us explain the relationship. The other thing to note is that females had a lower baseline in the childhood stress, but improved more on Y. So you can tell the difference. You can tell that through the differences of the two slopes of the lines. The differences in the slopes of the two lines means that gender does have an influence on the strength of the relationship between childhood stress and physical health outcomes. So what conclusions can we draw from this? Is there a moderation? Yes, but we have to be very cognizant of the potential for additional moderators and measurement error, because we can never be too sure with just a simple test. So moving on to mediation, we're going to assess the relationship between childhood stress and health through resilience of individuals to see if resilience scores were the means through which childhood stress affects physical health. So mediation is used to describe causal pathways as best as we can. So stress, again, was reported on a self-report scale. Resilience was measured through the Block and Tremin self-report resilience measure. And health was, again, measured through physiological tests of cardiovascular health and immune health. So unlike the McKinnon moderation statement about contingent relationships, Preacher and Hayes kind of stress that causation has a temporal assumption that the X variable happens before the moderator, and then the moderator to Y relationship occurs after that. So at the bottom here, we can see all of the different relationships that we're going to be testing. Moving on, we can visualize our variables. So here at the bottom, we have the histogram of all of our variables. And as you can see, they're all normally distributed, looking very good to keep moving forward. I've also included a correlation table here amongst the variables. And as you can see, they're all correlated, which is what we would expect to see and what we wanted to see. So that's another good sign. Lastly, we have our mediation diagram. Again, according to Barron and Kenny's 3 steps to testing mediation, C is the relationship of stress and health without considering resilience. A is the relationship of stress and resilience. This is an indirect effect. B is the relationship between resilience and health. And C prime is the relationship of stress and health holding resilience constant. Moving forward, we look at our diagnostics and everything looks normal and good to go. So we keep moving forward. Here we have the outputs for all of our models, all of our regression models. So we're going to walk through each one by one. So first we have our C parameter. This is a direct relationship between health and stress. So as expected, childhood stress did affect physical health. Next, we have our A parameter. This indicates a significant indirect effect of X on M, which is stress on resilience. We can also note that the B parameter is the effect of resilience on health, and that is also significant. This indicates a significant indirect effect of our mediator. Oops. Right. Going back to the direct effect of stress, we do have a significant pathway, and you can also see that there is a change, a decrease from C to C prime in the coefficient for stress. So this would mean that the mediator is accounting for some of the variance in the C pathway of the mediated model. So moving on, we can do a Sobel test to assess if the parameter between X and Y through the mediator is significant as an indirect effect. Pretty much what you get from this is a Z-score where you want the P to be less than 0.05. And here it is, but there are a few issues with the Sobel test. So as Barron and Kenny mentioned in their article, some of the issues with Sobel tests is that there is an issue of low power. So because the B is a partial, the B pathway is partial, X and M are collinear. So that takes away some of the predictive significance of M predicting Y when X is held constant. Additionally, there are issues with the assumption of normality. So what do we do instead? Is there possibly a better fix? And spoiler alert from the title, yes, there is. In 2018, Kenny notes that bootstrapping is probably a better way to address these issues. So bootstrapping is pretty much a random resampling procedure that is used to address lower power. And according to Kenny's website, bootstrapping is a useful way to further our confidence in our results. So in this example, we are resampling 1,000 times in this case, and Preacher and Hayes claim that resampling and bootstrapping will give us more powerful and generalizable results. So on the left, we have our bootstrap results, and we have our average causal mediation effect, which is an indirect effect, and it is significant. We have our average direct effect, which is also significant, our total effect, which is significant, and our proportion mediated, which is also significant. So these are all important to note that they're significant at the 0.05 level, which is what we set it at. So the question that this answers is, can we rule out mediation? And the answer is no, we can't rule it out. So next we have our sensitivity analysis, which tells us kind of how sensitive our moderator is and if there is a potential for confounds that are not accounted for in our model. So first we're going to look at the plot and see if the results we draw from that can match with our summary table. So at this point, it's around 0.25 on the x-axis, which is our sensitivity parameter. That is where the gray shading, which is our confidence interval, hits 0. So that's where it's kind of like creates a concern for confounding variables. So we're going to check with our summary table to see if our estimate is close. And great, it is exactly spot on. So our row is 0.25, which again is where 0 is introduced to the gray shading, which is our confidence interval. So what conclusions can we draw from this? Is there a mediating effect? Yes, but again, we have to be cognizant of additional mediators. Because C prime is not 0, there can be additional mediators in this relationship that we're not accounting for. So we definitely need to be cognizant of that. Additionally, in this study, we can claim partial mediation because childhood stress can affect health outcomes, and this main effect, even when resilience is held constant is still significant. Additionally, including resilience scores in the model creates a partial causal pathway that is also significant. So summary and limitations. Again, we have to take everything, all the tests and conclusions with a grain of salt because there is always a need for more research and to consider additional variables and possible explanations for these relationships. Additionally, these are very simple models, so adding more variables will make your relationships more complex. But overall, in our moderation model, sex was a significant moderator, and in our mediation model, resilience was a significant mediator in the relationship between childhood stress and physical health outcomes. Thank you, and I hope everyone enjoyed.